The ghetto. What comes to mind when we hear that word? Can you picture the intensity? People cramped together, striving to survive. The urban culture. Pants sagging. Can you smell that pungent odor rising from the concrete? What created this American ghetto? Frowned upon, sometimes glamorized, and oftentimes misunderstood. What is this place we call the ghetto? There are components of the ghetto in its embryonic stage. Urban segregation, restrictive real estate covenants, policy instruments, racial zoning. The ghetto, let's look at it. The notorious redlining. Housing laws of the mid-20th century. This exclusionary housing policy still affects cities today. Noted redlining because the community zone will be marked red to indicate to a bank or lender to refuse a loan or insurance to someone because they live in an area deemed to be a poor financial risk. Redlining herded black people into the sights of unscrupulous lenders who took them for money and for sport. Biased lending practices allow whites to rely on the credit system backed by government. Banks engaged in discriminatory practices. Homes were given insurance if not a single Negro lived there. These neighborhoods were colored red and were ineligible for FHA backing. Lenders were discouraged from making real estate investments in areas minorities live, resulting in minority neighborhoods ineligible to receive financing for a home. Whites were offered sizable subsidies to make it easier to buy a home. Blacks could not get a mortgage in their neighborhood. Owners stopped investing in their properties and neighborhoods fell into decline. The equation is simple. Stop investing in your hood due to policy equal neighborhood decline. Property owners in the hood would walk away from the buildings or burn them down to collect. When they took away these discriminatory laws, it became profitable to move back into the hood. That's the start of gentrification. But back on subject, rejectionist identity. My comrade Mark Sanders stated that racial oppression exercised through economic discriminatory jurisprudence and political inefficiency contributes to an obfuscated identity crisis and subtle self-hatred. Consequently, the many ill-informed develop a rejectionist view on life and oppose education, law, social responsibility, and community. After World War I, whites panicked with the Great Migration. They erected residential boundaries through the use of violence and law. So when we are talking the American black ghetto, it started forming in the 1920s. City planning without the people's consent is usually followed by confusion. We can look at the Bronx, for example. In the late 1950s and 60s, the center of the Bronx was blasted and bulldozed to build the Cross Bronx Expressway. In the 1970s, there were waves of fire. This trend occurred in other overpopulated cities like Sacramento. People were dislocated. They moved to dense, overpopulated, congested areas without a plan. In the 1970s, arson became popular as buildings were burned intentionally in an effort to recoup much of the lost value. Roger Starr. Roger Starr is the city housing commissioner of the Bronx. He stated that, quote, "If we turn off water, electricity, sanitation, and stop making repairs when systems break, we can drive the unproductive out." The urban system no longer took the peasant and turned him into an industrial worker. Now, with no industrial jobs, it is our task to keep this man a peasant, end quote. Now let's break away from this history. I got a story to tell. See, I'm an 80s baby. I remember in South Philly, where I was born, an all-black neighborhood. We could sit on our neighbor's porch. Your neighbor had your back. Everybody on the block knew each other. When we think of hospitality, we think of the South. Or we think of before the 80s, before the crack epidemic. But we only had one crackhead on our block, and she had morals and would look out for you better than some of these clean people today. I remember a feeling of belonging, connectedness that even a person from the suburbs would envy. I remember playing with my neighbors. I remember 10, 12 kids in my house one morning. I remember everybody walking together to school, catching lightning bugs. My father was a griot and could talk to the whole block. This is before alcohol would hit him hard, and my family split up. Now, my father moved to North Philly in the 90s and my mom Maryland. I lived with my dad for a year. Now, North Philly, it was the ghetto in every aspect, can't sugarcoat it. But it's something about people in a struggle where you can see that their strength and true essence is being inhibited. There's bullshit crab in a barrel hating on each other, people dying to be accepted, dying to be pretty, but there's homeboy love. And you can understand how people develop endearment for people in the struggle in the hood. Because there's drug dealing going on, but there's people whose essence rubs off on you. I remember me and my little brother playing football. Then a complete stranger with an ankle bracelet on for house arrest came and started throwing passes for no reason. I remember drug dealers who had a sort of a strange love for the community. It's an oxymoron. You see that one single father on the block taking care of his son, while the 90% of the kids don't have a father figure. You see the struggle. Families leave the ghetto. The hood loses assets. We are taught to get out. Without investing in our community, we see it as a shithole. Petty theft and crime is accelerated. As we assimilate an individualistic ideology, niggas want to be Al Capone, the strong survive, or only the wolves eat. Same meaning repeated in multiple phrases. The endearment of the nigga identity. Nigga. Nigga.
Another day, another struggle. I don't wanna live no more. Sometimes I hear death knocking at my front door. I'm living every day like a hustle. Another drug juggle. Another day, another struggle. I know how it feel to wake up fucked up. Pockets broke as hell, another rock to sell. People look at you like you's the user, selling drugs to all the losers, mad Buddha abuser. But they don't know about your stress-filled day. Baby on the way, mad bills to pay. That's why you drink Tanqueray, so you can reminisce and wish you wasn't living so devilish. Shit, I remember I was
rejection is self-destruction when you don't have knowledge of self.
Cause GED wasn't B.I.G. I got P.A.I.D. That's why my mom hate me. She was forced to kick me out, no doubt. Then I figured out niggas went for 20s down south. Packed up my tools for my raw power move. Glock 19 for casket and flower moves. For Trump's trying to stop my flow. And what they don't know will show on the autopsy. Went to see Poppy to cop me a brick. Asked for such a sign and he wasn't trying to hear it. Smoking mad Newports cause I'm doing court for an assault that I caught in Bridgeport, New York. Catch me if you can like the gingerbread man. You better have your gat in hand, cause man, I don't wanna live no more. Sometimes I hear death knocking at my front door. I'm living every day like a hustle. Another drug juggle. Another day, another struggle. I don't wanna live no more. Sometimes I hear death knocking at my front door. I'm living every day like a hustle. Another drug juggle. Another day, another struggle. I had the master plan. I'm in the caravan on my way to Maryland with my man Two Tex to take over this project. They call him Two Tex. He told Two Tex. And when he stopped the bus, he like to ask who's next.
Dr. Amos Wilson, a noted psychologist, critical thinker, and freedom fighter. He coined the term complementary theory. It states that our behavioral orientation complements the other race and their agenda. If whites are active, then blacks are passive. If whites are abstract and conceptual thinkers, then blacks must be functional, concrete thinkers.
Y'all want unconditional love. Talking about the stuff that don't wear off, it don't fade. It lasts for all these crazy days, these crazy nights. Whether you wrong or you right, I'm gonna still love you, still feel you, still there for you, no matter what. With unconditional love, listen to my truest thoughts, my truest feelings on my peers doing years beyond drug dealing. How many caskets can we witness before we see it's hard to live this life without God? So we must ask forgiveness. Ask Mama why I got this earth to die. Witness the tears falling free from my eyes before she could reply. For we were born without a silver spoon. My broken down TV show cartoons in my living room. One day I hope to make it a player in this game. Mama, don't cry, long as we try, maybe things change. Perhaps it's just a fantasy, a life where we don't need no welfare wish with our whole family. Maybe it's me that caused it, the fighting and the hurting in my room crying, cause I didn't want to be a burden. Watch Mama open up her arms to hug me, and I ain't worried about a damn thing. With unconditional love, this game, vision in your eyes to see, though things change, the future's still inside of me. We must remember that tomorrow comes after the dark, so you will always be in my heart. Unconditional love, the lessons in your eyes to see, though things change, the future's still inside of me. We must remember that tomorrow comes after the dark, so you will always be in my heart. With unconditional love, just got the message you've been calling all week. Been out here hustling on these streets, ain't had a chance to speak. But you know, with you and me, it's all G. We could never be enemies, cause you've been such a good friend to me. Where would I be without my dogs? No wonder why when times get hard, cause it ain't easy being who we are. Driven by my ambitions, desire higher positions, so I proceed to make G's eternally. And my mission is to be more than just a rap musician. can make them listen. Prison ain't what we need, no longer stuck in greed. Time to plan, strategize. My family's got it, me. We will make something out of nothing. No pleasure in the suffering. Neighborhood will be good if they can cut out all the busting. The liquor and the weed, the cussing. Sending love out to my block. The struggle never stops in this game. Unconditional in your eyes to see. Though things change, the future's still inside of me. We must remember that tomorrow comes after the dark. So you will always be in my heart. With unconditional love, the lessons in your eyes to see. Though things change, the future's still inside of me. We must remember that tomorrow comes after the dark. So you will always be in my heart. With unconditional I'll probably love. Never understand your ways. With every day I swear I hear you trying to change your ways while getting paid at the same time. Just had a baby with the same eyes, something inside. Piece of me died, these are strange times. How come I never